My wife cheated for years, so I exposed her to her ultra-religious family, got her disowned, and left her with nothing. Throwaway because, well, you'll see. I never imagined I'd end up writing a story like this, but 6 years into my marriage, I discovered the ultimate betrayal. My wife, let's call her Sarah, came from a deeply religious background. Her family was the epitome of conservative values: no dancing after dark, strict modesty, and an ironclad belief that any sin would lead to eternal damnation. I grew up in a more relaxed household, though I still respected tradition enough to attend church on holidays. I loved Sarah with all my heart and believed we were building a life on mutual trust. At least, that's what I thought. It began on a seemingly ordinary evening when Sarah mentioned a girls' night out. I never suspected anything unusual. After all, she had always been the perfect wife at home, cooking dinner, maintaining our pristine home, and showing endless affection. But that night, something was off. Sarah left her iPad behind on the kitchen counter, a small oversight that proved to be my window into her secret life. While tidying up, the device lit up with a text notification from someone named Jason. The message read, "Jason, last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." My heart skipped a beat. I tried to brush it off as innocent banter, but then a second message appeared. "Jason, I love how you taste, baby." Before I knew it, I was scrolling through countless messages, each more explicit than the last. There were pictures, videos, and a timeline of exchanges stretching back nearly 2 years. It wasn't a one-time lapse or a drunken mistake. It was a systematic double life. I sat there paralyzed with anger and disbelief, feeling a mix of betrayal and humiliation. After that initial shock, I made a decision. Instead of confronting her in a rage, I meticulously captured every incriminating screenshot, printing them out and compiling them into a dossier. I wasn't going to let this slip away quietly. Sarah's family had always been a looming presence in our lives. They were devout, strict, and unforgiving, especially when it came to matters of morality. While I tolerated their rigid views because I loved Sarah, I knew they'd be utterly devastated if they ever discovered her hidden indiscretions. I decided on a plan of cold, calculated revenge. For 1 week, I maintained the facade of the loving husband. I kissed her goodbye in the morning, texted her sweet nothings, and even encouraged her to enjoy her girls' night out, a ploy to keep her unaware of what I was about to do. Behind the scenes, however, I was gathering evidence and preparing for the blow to come. I did 2 critical things: documentation. I printed out every screenshot, texts, images, video stills, and arranged them neatly in a folder that left no room for doubt. Anonymous email. I composed a succinct yet explosive email and sent it anonymously to her father. The message read, "You think your daughter is a saint? Think again." Attached were all the files that exposed her double life. I felt a surge of satisfaction as I clicked send. It was a cold, calculated move, one that would shatter her world and rip open the carefully maintained image she had with her family. The following morning, Sarah's phone erupted with activity. Notifications and missed calls from her family poured in as she stumbled into the kitchen, her eyes wide with panic and dread. "Someone sent everything to my family!" she cried, her voice trembling as she clutched her phone. I was in the kitchen, calmly preparing my coffee, when she burst in like a wounded animal. "Who? What did they send?" I asked, my tone disturbingly even. She barely managed to choke out, "The texts, the photos, the videos. They know everything." At that moment, the mask of the caring husband slipped away. I leaned casually against the counter and, with a detached smile, said, "That was me." Her eyes filled with disbelief and terror as she stuttered, What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I know all about your escapades," I replied coolly. "I know about the lies, the deceit, the endless nights with your secret lovers. I just thought you'd appreciate a little dose of reality." The room fell silent except for her uncontrollable sobbing. I watched, unmoved, as she tried to grasp the magnitude of what I had done. Her phone rang incessantly, her father's angry voice filling the space as he denounced her behavior. I could almost hear him, calling her a disgrace, saying that she had brought shame upon their family and that she was dead to them. When she tried to beg me for forgiveness, pleading, "Please, I love you, I made a mistake, we can go to therapy," I merely laughed and shook my head. "A mistake?" I scoffed. "You had years to get it together. You had time to stop your endless betrayals, and now you're left with nothing. With that, I gestured to the home that was now entirely mine, my sanctuary, now free of deceit. "Pack your things," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "You're out." I reminded her of the prenup she'd insisted on, a document that left her with no assets of her own. She had been completely dependent on me, and now she had nothing, no money, no home, and certainly no family support, adding layers of desperation and regret. In the days that followed, the consequences of my actions rippled through every corner of her once perfect life. Her once proud image was now splintered beyond repair. I started receiving messages and calls from people in her religious community. Her father, whose faith had been her guiding star, now treated her as a pariah. Some of her relatives publicly condemned her, labeling her as sinful and unworthy of redemption. Her family's fury wasn't limited to private messages. It soon became a public spectacle. Social media buzzed with gossip and outrage. The community she had always believed was her sanctuary turned its back on her, and even a few of her closest childhood friends began to distance themselves, unwilling to be associated with what they now saw as a moral failure. It was as if her entire world had turned upside down in a matter of hours. I learned later that one of her brothers had confronted her on the street. With tears streaming down his face, he asked, "How could you do this to us, to your family?" His words echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the betrayal that wasn't just against me, but against every single person who had ever looked up to her. But I didn't stop there. I wanted her to feel the crushing weight of isolation. I contacted a few of her close friends under the guise of concern, letting subtle hints slip about her indiscretions. Trust shattered quickly. Soon enough, invitations to gatherings, community events, even church functions dried up as her reputation became tarnished beyond repair. She found herself ostracized, an outcast in the very community that had once embraced her. I also began to reflect on our years together. Every dinner she had prepared, every soft-spoken "I love you" whispered in the dark. They all seemed like hollow echoes now. I'd ignored the red flags, convinced that our love was strong enough to weather any storm. Instead, I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered pride. I felt a perverse sense of relief mixed with the finality of closing a dark chapter of my life. Over the next several weeks, as I settled into a routine without her, I couldn't entirely ignore the nagging thought. Was my revenge truly complete? I had exposed her, yes, but a part of me wondered if the damage was enough to make her understand the magnitude of her actions. I began to receive cryptic messages from mutual acquaintances asking if she was okay, if she'd reconsider her choices. The irony wasn't lost on me. While she was left drowning in regret and isolation, I was free to rebuild my life. I started therapy soon after, not because I felt guilty or remorseful, but because I needed help processing the myriad of conflicting emotions. The sessions forced me to examine whether my pursuit of revenge had truly healed my wounds, or if I was simply lashing out at a painful reality. The therapist asked, "What do you hope to achieve by exposing her secrets to everyone she holds dear?" That question haunted me for days, echoing in the quiet hours of the night when the silence was too loud. Each therapy session peeled back layers of our relationship, revealing that perhaps I had also lost pieces of myself along the way. Still, I couldn't escape the satisfaction that came with seeing her life crumble, a life built on a facade that was now irreparably broken. I made plans to move to a new city, start afresh, and maybe even find love again. Love that was honest, genuine, and without the masks we had both worn for far too long. A month later, I caught wind that Sarah had reached out to a community mediator in a desperate bid for reconciliation with her family. But the damage was done. Her father's unwavering condemnation and her siblings' cold rejections had left deep scars. Even when she attempted to apologize publicly, it was met with outrage rather than forgiveness. Her pleas for a second chance were drowned out by the echoes of betrayal. One evening, as I was leaving work, I saw her across the street, hunched over, alone, seemingly lost in thought. For a fleeting second, a pang of remorse stabbed through me. But then I remembered every lie, every betrayal. I walked past without a glance, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions. I eventually found solace in small, everyday routines, morning runs, quiet evenings with a book, and reconnecting with old friends who had always been there for me. I even started dating again, although cautiously. The new relationships were built on honesty from the very start, and that transparency was something I now valued above all else. As I sit here recounting this story, I recognize that revenge, while satisfying for a time, does not mend the deeper wounds inflicted by betrayal. I had set out to shatter Sarah's perfect world, and in doing so, I dismantled a shared history that could never be rebuilt. Her fall from grace was a harsh lesson in the price of dishonesty, one that left her with nothing but regret and isolation, while I learned that the path to healing requires more than just retribution. So here's my final word to anyone reading this. If you're planning to lead a double life or betray the trust of someone who loves you, remember that every action has consequences. There's no escaping the truth, and once it's exposed, there's no hiding from the fallout. And for those who feel betrayed, know that the path to recovery starts with forgiveness, even if it's forgiveness for yourself. In the end, while I may have gained a sense of vindication, I also learned that revenge is a double-edged sword. The pain we inflict on others often leaves an indelible mark on our own souls. As I continue to move forward, I hope that both of us eventually find a way to make peace with our past, even if it's in very different ways.